said, "You're not gonna believe this, you're not gonna believe this." The cops said we can do anything we want to her and we won't get in trouble. I had been there one night, I had been drugged and I had been gang raped and I had been filmed. I don't know if I knew about the filming of it right away. I was lost and I didn't realize there was drugs in my system because it's not like you feel high. They're like date rape drugs. And I said, "Do you know any Christians?" And he kind of laughed and he said, "Why?" And I said, "Because this is evil and I promised God if he saved my life, I would help him. So I need to learn a lot of things really fast." And so he said, okay, but let's get you saved.
Welcome to Pure Passion. My name is Stacia Freeman. When we think of sex trafficking, we normally think of underage teens and children being forced against their will, which is sadly the case much of the time. But let's not forget that many who are being trafficked are over the age of 18, and they also desperately need the support that we can give to ministries that have been raised up to help them. Today, we have one such lady who was forced into a life of sex slavery at the age of 22 by being incapacitated mentally and physically by drugs that were constantly fed into her system by her perpetrators. Did you know that some of the people in the pornography that you may have seen are actually slaves who are being brutalized on a daily basis in the most horrific ways imaginable? Let's listen to Jill as she lets us in on some big, dark secrets.
I grew up in Northern California, in suburbia, and my parents got divorced when I was 14 years old, and so the family became disconnected. But I had a little sister that I helped raise, and I just basically tried to help with that and work, and I really didn't have any direction because everybody had gone their own way. And eventually I ended up having a fitness company. But I had taught jazzercise and I had my own fitness business. And then a few years after that, I married a rock and roll singer. Not like you're picturing, more like Kenny Loggins type, a little more folk rock, country rock. And I loved my husband very much, but it was very intense, and it was probably emotionally abusive, and I tried everything I could. I knew the Lord as a little girl, but I didn't know him growing up. It was, they taught me morals, but they didn't go to church or anything. And so I didn't really know to pray for my marriage. I don't know what would have happened if I did, but I had to leave. And so when I left, I got in a car accident as a passenger in someone's car. And I was injured, so I couldn't do my dance fitness anymore. So I had lost my business, I had lost my marriage, and I was just really hurting, and I was very sad. And I had sang with my husband now and then, and so this girl that was having some jam nights locally, she would see me out with my girlfriends. We would just go out every once in a while, and to this one club that was in our neighborhood, and it was very, it was all friends. We knew everybody knew each other, and so it was more of a safe atmosphere in our minds, and pretty much had no trouble there. But she started getting me to sing, and making me her project, and building up my confidence, and so eventually we went out of the area, and she called me and said, "Jill, somebody wants us to have these jam nights in another city in different spots around the Bay Area." And I had gone there. And now in between this time, I was still like hurting, not knowing what I was going to do for a living, not knowing, I was just really hurt, and from the divorce, and my family really didn't seem to be really compassionate about the divorce, and so I was really kind of alone. And so during that year, I can't say that nothing happened before that they hadn't gotten to me before this, but what I remember is that when I went to this other town, it was only 20 minutes away, and I went there to sing, and then we met people, and we thought it was the same atmosphere. All our friends, mostly we were around the musicians, but then there's the people who come into the place that are the customers there, and you begin to have like a false sense of security. And so I needed a place to live. I needed to start over. And so I was told that somebody had a room and a place where I could go. And so I talked to them, and I know that after I had been there one night, I had been drugged and I had been gang raped and I had been filmed. I don't know if I knew about the filming of it right away. I had no memory of it, but I knew that someone had touched me, and I knew that and that they became completely different people the next morning. And it just was, that atmosphere was just, I knew I was in danger and that I was hurt. And because my family was kind of in disarray, I really didn't, and I didn't want to go to them. I didn't know what to do. So you're instantly homeless. And I'd never been homeless. I'd worked all my life. I, grew up in suburbia, and I was lost. And I didn't realize there was drugs in my system, because it's not like you feel high. They're like date rape drugs that take away your memory. And you find out later, they can wake you up and your eyes are open, you're talking, but you're not there at all. And you'll have no memory from the time you went to sleep to the time you woke up. So I didn't know all this then. I just knew something had happened. And I knew I had to get out. And so all I remember really was trying, going back to my friends and where we were singing, and somebody saying, well, look, if you're not okay, you can come and stay with us. And so I would go, went there, and they did the same thing. And it just happened over and over until I really, it took me a while to figure out what was even happening to me. And I think there was times where I'd get away for just a little while, and then they would come back, and I just stepped into basically a place where it was a game, and there were rings, and it was just a really bad situation. That was just like you couldn't even imagine. I wouldn't have imagined in my wildest dreams that what was happening in the United States and what was happening in the Bay Area would ever happen to anybody. I wanted to say that human trafficking is nothing less than murder, and it involves torture. It is cruel. The traffickers never intend for the victims to survive in human trafficking, and their life between now and that end, if they are not rescued, is a pretty torturous one, and there's a lot of suffering.
Daniel Walker spent years infiltrating the multi-billion-dollar global sex industry and has written an eyewitness account of what is really going on inside the brothels and bars of today's world. It's called God in a Brothel, an undercover journey into sex trafficking and rescue. It's an account of years of undercover investigation where hundreds of children and teens were set free from sex slavery, and dozens of perpetrators were prosecuted for their horrendous crimes against humanity. To get God in a Brothel, just go to www.purepassion.us.
Thinking of having a night out on the town with your buddies? Maybe picking up a working girl and going crazy? Let everyone know you're the man, right? Maybe even go younger tonight. She needs the money. Get the babe you never had when you were a kid. Don't ask, don't tell, right? Or maybe you'd like to take less risk and just score some underage porn to get you through the night. Thing is, that C note that you just laid down for the girl, it's going to pay for the kidnapping and gang rape of the next one. Because the girl you have tonight will be dead or destroyed before the year's out. Stop the insanity. We can help.
So eventually I tried to begin to reach out and try to find out if I could get some help. I was told as things moved along, it seemed to be more and more people were involved in hurting me. I learned how to bartend because I didn't know what else to do. I needed to earn some money, and I thought I would get some money and get out. And I would bartend and go back to where I was staying, and they would do this to me over and over and over, and I don't know how I really got back up to work. And I suppose some of the girls were driven out into the street or into worse circumstances. And it is not a judgment on them. I'm not saying I'm any better than them. It just wasn't in my mind to be able to do something like that. So I learned how to bartend, and I began to try to investigate the crime against me myself. People would come in for drinks. People would talk about it. Evidently, the movies were seen by a lot of people. I had somebody come in and ask me for my autograph, and the films were not, they were making, and I would say pornography, but it was more humiliation, extremely evil stuff. And I I just kept, after a while, I was talking to a pastor, and he was telling me that as he listened to my story, he realized that there was a time where I stopped trying to prevent people from raping me, and I switched over into trying to stay alive. And it just seemed to get bigger and bigger, and I had no idea how many people were involved until really it got later on. I reached out for help. I went to a hospital twice. I went to a women's organization that was supposed to help people. I went to doctors because I knew they had drugged me, and I wanted to find out what was in my system. Wherever I went, I was blocked. No one would help me. I did talk to a woman in a hospital. She came in the back of the hospital once, and she told me that, she said, Jill, I'm an advocate, but I also work for the district attorney's office, and we know about this crime. We've known about it for 7 years. She said, do you realize that you're a victim of a satanic crime? And I looked at her, and I was already almost dead. I couldn't run any, I was so tired, and I thought, wow, how could what was so bad just gotten worse? And I was like, what? And I tried to grasp into pictures in my head of different moments, trying to see was there signs of it? Did I see this? And I looked at her and I just said, no, I didn't know. And she said, we don't know of anybody who has made it to a hospital, let alone survived this crime. And eventually she left, and it had been several days probably since they touched me, so I told the doctor that, and that they probably used, what I heard, they used protection for themselves, and so I knew they may not find anything. I just needed it for it to be on paper because I thought I didn't have much longer to live. So I didn't care anymore what the risk was. I was told that if I reported it to the police, they would arrest me. I did. The police were at the hospital twice, and I was arrested for absolutely no reason at some point after that. I'd seen one of the police officers who was there at the hospital, and I had asked I'd asked for him. And because they were trying to drug test me, and I had been drugged. And I asked for him. I don't know how I remembered his name. And he came into the room, and he said, what do you want, Jill? And I felt like it might have been the first time that I heard the Lord, just don't look at him, get out. I just knew that I just lowered my eyes, and they transferred me somewhere, and then they just left me there outside after they released me because there were no charges. And, I thought maybe, okay, you've had a bad experience with a certain group or certain, a few officers or one in particular maybe. And so I kept going for, I don't know how long. And in the middle of this, I began to pray. And I began to ask people, I'd be bartending and I'd ask people, do you know anything about God? Do you know anything about the Bible? Does it talk about evil? Because I need to know what to do. And I actually found some people that say, Jill, it's all through the Bible. And I go, well, what am I supposed to do? And so I would, I was grasping and I was just trying to keep going. And so I was driving home in my car one night, and I heard on the radio this woman talk about spiritual warfare on the radio, and she was a Christian. And my radio just changed channels out of nowhere, and I pulled over and I listened to her for an hour, and I said, oh my gosh, they know. There's Christians, and they know, they understand. And so I listened for the whole hour, and I went back in to where I lived and kept going. And then one day I was driving by a mall, a mini mall, and I saw a Christian bookstore. And in my head came the name of her book. And I went inside and I asked for the book, and they had it. And so I went in back to where I was, getting raped every night, knowing they were drugging me. They threatened my life, said, your God can't save you now. And I read this book, and I would say the prayers in the middle of hell. These are spiritual warfare prayers. Universally, we are finding that victims of human trafficking are also victims of ritual abuse. And it has happened in Cambodia, where children were rescued, and they asked for help to be free from something other than their perpetrators. And that was, the story came out that they were forced into rituals and witchcraft ceremonies. And there was the stories from the FBI case in Los Angeles where girls were brought over the border into LA, and they were also threatened with witchcraft against their families, things like that. I do know personally that it is a very evil crime, and so it shouldn't, I guess, surprise us that these practices are common, not only to control, but maybe a personal thing with the perpetrators themselves. And so I have found that to be extremely common, more than I could ever have imagined, even in the United States of America.
There are an estimated 27 million people that are being sold into slavery right now at this moment.
These pedophiles will pay $400 to spend an hour with a child.
And they caught 3 Western men with a 2-month-old baby that they were having sexual interaction with.
The darkness of the sex trade just ensnares so many of them that they become what they are doing, and they feel they're no longer good for anything outside of the sex trade.
To watch her transform into somebody that believes in herself and has self-worth and sees herself beyond what somebody else says about her, it would be worth any amount of money. I mean, even if you could only help one person, I would say it would be worth it.
I really believe that God has called us to this human rights issue for the 21st century.
When I realized how evil it was, I began to call out to God, and without God, I would have never survived. I didn't know how to get out. I had tried before, and I got very confused. There was a lot of stuff. I know that they make it difficult for a victim to get out, because and plus I thought once I was too far away, then only the bad people would know where I was, and it would be easier to take me out. At least in the middle of everybody, I had the attention of a lot of people, and so my mindset was kind of, just to stay alive. And so anyway, I kept going, and I kept fighting, and at one point, near the end of it, there was a time where I was in somebody's house, and God would send even criminals to help you at that point. I mean, people were arguing over who owned me in front of me, but people would be even they were disgusted by it. And so people that liked you, even from the bartender that met you and they knew what was happening, sometimes people would come and just get you out, or you would have died. And so one guy was trying to help me, and he was just a nice guy, and I was sitting on his couch, and his roommate came running home. And I just knew something was up. I knew there was an important moment, and I pretended to be asleep on the couch. And I was kind of shaking, so I was hoping it worked. And I heard him say, he was all excited, and he was just amped up kind of, and he said, "You're not gonna believe this, you're not gonna believe this. The cops said we can do anything we want to her and we won't get in trouble." Anything. That means anything. And so that was it. I thought, I had been running for 10 years, and that was unheard of, for you to even still be standing. And so I went to my hometown, which wasn't too far away, and I dropped my car keys in a garbage can because they'd found me wherever I went. And I got on a payphone and I said, "God, I hope you're good, because this is all yours. I've got nothing left. I've tried to fix it. I can't do this. I'm not going to make it." And I said, "I need you to find me the place to go, because I can't trust anybody." And so I got on the phone, and someone was going to finally, help me. And, you're also thinking shelters. I don't want to be asleep in a shelter full of people. You're picturing some gym with, homeless guys in there. And after what you've been through, you don't want to go through that. And so it was a domestic violence shelter, and all of a sudden the phone disconnected. I called them back, the phone disconnected again, and they were going to take me, and the phone disconnected again. And all of a sudden I thought, wait, I just prayed for God to send me to the right place. Maybe I should call the next number. So I said, "Can I call you right back?" Which was a huge risk, So I called the next number, and this man on the phone said, "Where are you?" And I learned not to say everything, but I said, "I'm a rape victim and I'm not getting any help." That's all I said. He said, "Where are you?" And he said, "You're only like, 8 blocks from us." So I got there, and I came in, and the man said, and he listened to me. I didn't tell him everything still, and he said, "What is it that you want?" And I just cried, and I said, "Nobody's even asked me that in 10 years. And I said, "Do you know any Christians?" And he kind of laughed, and he said, "Why?" And I said, "Because this is evil, and I promised God if he saved my life, I would help him. So I need to learn a lot of things really fast." And so he said, okay, but let's get you safe. And so he said, okay, he goes, "You know what? As a matter of fact, I know the social worker that's got connections you wouldn't believe. And she happens to be a Christian." But so she came along, and they said the first thing is, because they had men there, on one side of the building, they wanted to get me away from the men. And then I asked for Christians. So they took me to a place that was Christians, and they prayed over me the minute I hit the door. I told them everything. They prayed over me. They said, okay. And then they brought in a social worker who started a case for me for disability, and I insisted that it go down for what it was, that they wrote down what it was. And they would and the people at the shelter, they took home my paperwork so no one would come in and steal it. I mean, they covered me with protection, everything. And they were only supposed to hold me 3 weeks, but they said they would not release me until the Lord told them to, that they knew that they couldn't. And they had all of a sudden girls coming in with stories of little pieces of things that they said, this is not happening by accident. So God entered my life powerfully at that point. The woman who was the author of the book I was reading showed up, and Women's Aglow had sent me off to a conference to meet her, and she prayed over me, and she heard the story. God was just every step of the way making sure I was safe. And I lived on church grounds for 2 years with a key to come and go in one place. But they came after me again, and they let me know they would, that they're just waiting. And I've noticed, this is what I've learned about other victims, is they become, they know what's going to happen when I'm out from under your wing. And I began to give up at some point again, and my sister brought me to the South Bay, and I was helped by a ministry. They taught me the ins and outs of the ministry, and I went through my own healing and just spiritual training for years. And then I started out of Egypt again. I said, it's time. And I started out of Egypt because I tried when I first was rescued. And we started with a prayer campaign because I knew God's instructions were to get his people to pray, because that's how I wouldn't have made it without me praying for myself. Without God, it was going to be impossible. I know that. And without God, it's going to be impossible for others to get out. So I'm now in the Coalition to End Human Trafficking with the DA's office, the FBI, ICE. I'm the head of the faith committee there. I've been there since 2005. We do advocacy for Out of Egypt Network in the Bay Area. We network with all the organizations. We do ministry. We teach on spiritual. We just sent a DVD to Africa to train pastors on the spiritual battle, on what I've learned in the spiritual battle, and how what works and how it manifests in the physical. So I'm just reaching out wherever I can or wherever God leads me to. But my fight my battle is to expose that girls are still being drugged and filmed and raped here and beyond here, and from what I hear across the country. And they have not received help. And we're having breakthroughs. And my fight is that they're heard. And that anybody that has this problem or knows of somebody, that they will call us or call the national hotline. And that they will do something, because it may be their last chance. You may be the last person they see. I have experienced God protecting me even today, up until this point. And there have been battles, and it has not been without a few storms. But God is right there, and God is not a man that he will lie. God insists that it's his decision that counts, and it's what he says that counts. And I trust that with everything in me. And that's what gives me the ability to stand there. And sometimes it's not that sometimes you don't get a little, you look around you and you go, oh my gosh. But this is, I'm standing in the midst of where God put me and where he's brought me. And I'm standing there so that others can stand there and come out from where they are. So we'll pray them out, and we'll do whatever we need to do to be there for them.
The first thing that the Lord showed me was to get his people to pray. And we began to reach the pastors, not unlike yourselves, and not only tell them what was going on, but ask them to just pray. That's all we did, ask them to pray. And then we gave them 3 focused prayers. So then they're all praying in agreement. And this was absolutely crucial, because I'm sure that you must know that when you pray in unity for specific things, that it has more power and that you become a force to be reckoned with. And so I would have them pray that the victims would be brought out of victimization and into the hands of the Lord. And the second prayer was that there would be advocates and authorities to receive them wherever they were found, and that they would believe them and help them. And we prayed that the crimes would be, light would shine on the crimes so that they have less power, because people want to scatter when the lights go on if there's something wrong. So we asked them, and we still do. Those are our 3 first prayers for victims. And we have run the campaign over the last couple of years. We had one for 10 months in 10 cities. And we saw 7 absolute miracles that we know of. We don't know the ones we don't know of. But the Lord showed us absolute miracles where all 3 prayers were answered for each and every one of those victims. It was amazing. And all we did was say, pastors, get your people to pray, your intercessors, your church if you're comfortable with that, your intercessors if you're a little less comfortable with that, and if you don't know how to have that in your realm of influence, pray yourselves. I'm telling you, do not underestimate your prayers and who you are in this, because you are the ones who are going to turn over the tables of the money changers of human trafficking in your area.
If you're someone who is being forced to work in the sex industry, one of the first places that you can call for help is the National Human Trafficking Hotline. Call them at 1-888-3737-888. You can also call Jill's Out of Egypt Network at 1-408-88-EGYPT, or visit their website at oe-network.org. There's a great verse in the Martin Luther hymn, "A Mighty Fortress is Our God," that says, "And though this world with devils filled should threaten to undo us, we will not fear, for God hath willed his truth to triumph through us. The prince of darkness grim, we tremble not for him. His rage we can endure, for lo, his doom is sure. One little word shall fell him." Let's rise up as the body of Christ and stand against such forces of darkness as we've seen today. As the Bible says, greater is he who is in us than he who is in the world. Pray for Jill and for all those who are being terrorized by this horrific sex trade, and get behind ministries like hers who are out there on the front lines. This could be the church's finest hour. Want to be a part? I'm Stacia Freeman for Pure Passion.